Right, let me accept that. What would happen if I said I don't want to be recorded? Would that go through well? I don't know how that would work. Yeah, but anyways, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is an afternoon buff session. It's our first one in the afternoon, so that's why I almost said good morning. Welcome back to Boston Urban Forest Friends Buff. For anyone who is returning and for anyone this is their first meeting, welcome for joining us. Thank you for joining us. You're welcome here. I am your host, Jarrell Ferguson. I'm the Community Outreach Manager at Speak for the Trees. I'm a Boston resident. I've been at Speak for the Trees for almost 2 years. I've always been into trees and to nature. So I'm just really happy to have you here as part of our meeting today. Thank you for also being here with the time change. And I'm glad that it worked out for everyone who showed up today. Happy Women's History Month. I think it's one of my favorite times of the year. Yes. Women's history is every day, but have it highlighted this month is pretty awesome. I borrowed this image from the Museum of Science, which is also in the process of honoring women in science and through all types of fields throughout history. So check out the Science Museum. They're really doing something good about that. Yeah, please drop some info here about you and one woman you'd like to honor. That would be awesome. Please. Well, let's hop right into our agenda today. Our meeting norms on the next slide, David. We'll be recording this. And the next slide.
You see the meeting norms one, Drell? Does that show up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep, I got it.
All right. Hold on. Next one. There we go.
All right. So our agenda for today is welcome back and happy Women's History Month. Community updates, which we will have next. We do have our special guest, the Director of Urban Forestry, new Director of Urban Forestry, Todd Mistor here, who will let us know about what he's going to do and answer some of your questions. And then, please always at the end, we'd like you to fill out the survey, the buff survey. If you haven't, that'll help inform our future meetings and how we conduct our meetings. Anyways, all right. So please raise your hands for community updates. Who would like to go first? All right. Hey, Alana, how you doing?
Good. I just wanted to hop on quickly. Like I told you, I have to go soon, but didn't want to miss you guys.
Thank you for being here. I'm so glad you made it.
Sure. Thank you. Just wanted to give some quick community updates regarding the Environmental Health as Wealth Advocacy Coalition. The group did some great work prior to the tree ordinance hearing that was this week on Monday. David led a great community discussion where we invited environmental groups and others to come in and work with us on our goals and principles that we drafted. And we used that information to then allow for community edit on the actual tree ordinance. Frank O'Brien was great at gathering all of that information and getting that submitted before the tree ordinance. We had group members who offered testimony. The day of at the ordinance, we were writing in written comment. And so now the group will need to figure out next action steps going forward to really hopefully have our suggestions and language incorporated into the ordinance. So it was really a heavy lift, but it was a great group effort in a very short amount of time. And so I was just excited to report that. Related to Morton Street, so we had the Conservation Commission hearing Wednesday. We were all on for 3 hours. Thank you so much to all of you who wrote letters, who stayed on. It was a very long night. That hearing has been continued. I don't have the date yet, but I will let the group know. They have some information that they need to provide. I'm actually going to submit myself some additional information to the commission that I think will be helpful in kind of coming to a decision related to whether or not this project would move forward. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Alana. Always appreciate your updates and thank you for the hard work that you continue to do. Bill Masterson, you're up next. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Jarrell. Hi, everybody. Bill Masterson, Tree Eastie. I have 3 things to mention to the group. One is that we've been given permission from Boston Parks to plant park trees in 3 different parks in East Boston in conjunction with Arbor Day, Earth Day. So that's going to take place around the last week of April. Second is that we've got some off-season activities taking place. One is we're developing bilingual tree benefit education material for residents. It's going to be sort of, this is why you should like trees. And then this is the call to action. Call to action would be how to get a street tree planted in front of your home, how to get a free yard tree from Tree Eastie, how to volunteer to water a tree, and how to volunteer to help us dig holes and plant trees this year. So that's pretty exciting. And the last is we have organized with Urban Wilds to do a fruit tree pruning clinic the last week of March. So it's going to be on that Tuesday, I think the 28th, and everybody's invited to join. So we're going to have a certified arborist there who's going to help us prune fruit trees that are in the Rockies, Urban Wilds in East Boston, and also show people how to prune general trees, not just fruit trees. So it should be a great educational experience for anybody that's interested. If you are, I'll put my contact information in the chat, or you can go on our website, treeeastie.org, to find out more about it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Lisa, you are up next. Community updates. How are you today?
Excellent. How is everybody today?
Great.
Okay, so a couple things. Good. Regarding the Monday's tree ordinance hearing in Boston, so the Crane Ledge Woods Coalition attended the hearing. A few members of the steering committee. We followed up with an email to Chief Reverend White Hammond requesting specifics on the reference priority parcel plan. In case it's useful, I'll post the city's presentation from the hearing on this chat. And we've also asked for all the comments that were submitted from many of you, but they're still compiling it. The other thing I guess I'll mention is Mount Hope Canterbury Cemetery in Mattapan and Eastern Rosendale. You know, we've pitched many times in many forms to the city the issue of replacing the, you know, over 100 mature trees that have died in the last several years in the cemetery, garden style cemetery, but nothing's happening yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate the update. Sarah Freeman, you're up next.
Hi,
Morning.
everyone.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Afternoon.
everyone. I'd like to keep you all posted on the Shattuck Hospital Franklin Park issue. Sadly, another month has gone by without any positive news. There are conversations, like a lot of attention going to the lack of transparency and the fact that the one proposal was submitted in August, which is over half a year ago. How long does it take to review one proposal? And they're being very quiet about it. And there may be some, I don't want to cast aspersions publicly, so I'll stop myself there, but it looks like they're maybe not communicating well, even to elected officials, and something strange going on there, but I will keep you posted. And if anyone is interested in helping or getting more info, I'll put my email in the chat. It's 13 acres in Franklin Park, and the state has shown very little interest in trying to find a way to do, not, they're making it either or, like as if you can get parkland back or we can provide recovery services. And many of us would like them to explore ways to have both, especially since I think we've learned from Mass and Cass that it's not always a good idea to concentrate too much of the same thing around addiction, recovery, and mental health in one spot. And the number that has been not publicly revealed, but privately shared is more than 400 units, and that's a little overwhelming to the neighbors who, by the way, were not included in the planning. So I'll leave it at that. Sorry to be a downer every month.
Sarah, you're never a downer. You know, you work really hard and you're always out there. You're like everywhere. And every time I see Sarah's name, I'm like, oh, I know Sarah Freeman. I'm like, oh, do you know Sarah Freeman? Yes, I know Sarah Freeman. And it's good to know you. So you're not a downer. It's
Thank you.
unfortunate the information that you report isn't always the best, but it's not your fault. You know, we got to get everybody else on board to do the right things. All right. All right. So Jareen, I have you up next. Please introduce yourself to Buff.
Yes, so hello everyone. I'm new to Buff and it's really great to be here. So I work with Poetic Justice Group. We're based at MIT. And I just want to give a little bit of background on my work and what I do. So I have a professional background in architecture and urban design, and my work has dealt a lot with community public projects that address climate justice and equity. And we're currently working on an initiative called Black Forests, where it's a nationwide monument, living monument dedicated to lives lost due to COVID-19 and planting trees for them. Our focus is that we're looking at racial disparities and environmental justice and equity as well. And through our work, we are focused on BIPOC communities, specifically Black lives, and we're collecting names and stories of those lost to COVID-19, and then tying that to our tree dedication. So we've been working on tree plantings across 10 cities, and we're specifically working in the Boston area at the moment and collaborating with Speak for the Trees as well. So we are looking towards connecting with people who would be interested, local organizations like that are dealing with the sort of like agency of our work, in the sense that we are focused on neighborhoods that are looking at addressing the sort of environmental need, everything from expanding tree coverage to urban heat islands and air pollution as well. So our work is being seen as a sort of like artwork, this sort of nationwide artwork. And when you think about monuments, it's usually the sort of like inanimate object, but what does it mean to think about a monument as a sort of living, breathing sort of dedication? So that's the work that we're doing. And we're also thinking about long-term tree stewardship, so connecting with community members and using that as an opportunity for healing as well. So that's a sort of like the short story to the work, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you all. If you're interested, you can just you can email, message me directly, or put your email in the chat as well, and I'll make sure to reach out. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. It looks like you got some interest already in the chat, so check it out. Any other updates before we move on to our executive director?
And Joreen, is it okay if we include your email and we send out notes like a couple of days after? Can we include your email on that?
Yeah, of course. And I'll also drop my email in the chat as well.
Great.
If anyone wants
Thank
it.
you. Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you, Jerry. Erica, your hand is up.
Yeah, just a quick update because for folks who might not have been able to watch the hearing, Boston had put out an RFP for creation of a private land tree canopy alliance of organizations. Really looking forward to getting that started with a lot of folks on this call, additional folks who haven't been able to engage yet. We don't have more like concrete details of exactly what the timeline is yet. Still, Mass Audubon's still working with the city, but I just wanted to let people know that we were selected on that RFP. We had submitted a proposal, so we're really excited about that. Thanks, Lisa, for the clapping. I'm so excited too. But we don't have a lot of details yet. If you want to reach out, feel free to reach out to me. My email's in the chat. But we will have more details and keep this group posted throughout the spring and as we get closer to planting trees on private property and taking care of them. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Erica. It's always great to hear from you. All right, no other hands are raised, so I will defer to you.
Thank you.
David.
Just want to quickly wish everyone a happy St. Patty's Day too. Actually, we forgot about that. It's the day of green. We all love green. I just wanted to shout out to Power Core Boston. Jarell and I had a wonderful visit to them this morning. And it reminded me that we shared with them some job opportunities. So we're hiring for staff at our organization. And I'll share the link in the chat in a minute. So it's an associate director position, which is sort of an executive leader type of role. We have a tree care associate position. So we have a watering truck that we're going to be out in the community watering trees. So that's someone who loves to get their hands dirty and be out and about. And then we're also hiring for some young adults to be leaders in our Teen Urban Tree Corps program this summer, so 19 to 24-year-olds, and that's a 2-month position. And then we are hiring about 25 or so teenagers, Boston teenagers, to be in our Teen Urban Tree Corps program. So it's a long list of opportunities, and lest I forget, actually, we also have an opportunity for anyone who's in college or a recent college grad, whether that be community college or a 4-year college or even a master's program. We have an internship program available through the Mass CEC, and that would be either for the summer or any semester going forward. So that's a lot. So we're excited to be growing our work and hopefully grow it in partnership with wonderful folks like Mr. Mistor. So with that, I don't think there's anything else to say, Jarrell, from our end, right?
No, I think we've covered everything. Thank you all for your community updates. And as David mentioned, the meeting today with PowerCore went really well. They're an awesome group, and we hope that you all can learn more about them and the work that they're doing in the city of Boston. Again, so thank you all for the great updates. If you're interested in supporting any of the work that you just heard, feel free to reach out to the person in the chat and get their email addresses and follow up with them after the meeting. That's what we're all about, building connections and keeping them. So now I'd like to introduce to you all the brand new Director of Urban Forestry for the city of Boston, Mr. Todd Mistor.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me now. The microphone's adjusted. I'm very excited to participate with this group and excited to be here in Boston. Again, some of you may have been at the hearing on Monday, and so I had a brief part in that, and a little bit of my background was there. So I am from Detroit. So I worked for the city of Detroit in urban forestry for a number of years. Then I worked in another Michigan community in a broader public works context. So I bring some experience certainly in some of the things that are going through, that the city of Boston is going through, experience in working with nonprofit partners, experience in trying to get out there in community engagement. And I know a lot of we learn a lot by some of the failures that we have, and we improve on those processes and try to move forward from there. So one thing we never had in Detroit that you guys have here in Boston is this urban forest plan. That is a great roadmap. And essentially that's, one of the reasons I'm here. The urban forest plan called for a reorganization of the urban forestry division, which is pretty minimal within the Parks Department. So trying to reorganize that, restructure that, and ultimately grow it a little bit to have a better responsiveness in the community and more capacity in the community. And that's ultimately what we need. We need to build our capacity to engage with residents and to increase the urban forest canopy, which is the overall goal. I think everyone on this call shares that goal, and that is certainly the goal of the Urban Forest Master Plan. So there were a number of questions that were submitted beforehand, and I have them in front of me. I can kind of go through them. I'll try to be as succinct as possible while still offering as much information as I can. So again, I've been in Boston now coming up on 3 weeks. On Monday will be 3 weeks. So I just moved into my apartment last night. I'm living over in Brighton. So for the first couple of weeks, I've sort of been out of a hotel and sort of finding my way around the city and just having to deal with that. So I'm excited to be settling down a little bit. And again, these last couple of weeks have just been learning a lot about what goes on internally with the city structure and the city organization. There's a lot of good energy there, and there's a lot of connections that need to be established or reestablished or built upon. So one of the first questions that I have here is, what would be my general priorities for the first 6 months or the first year? And again, one of the first things that I've already mentioned is expanding our urban forestry division. So the first part of that called for hiring the director. And then we're in the process of hiring arborists. You know, we have a tree warden who's kind of been basically holding our whole operation together and doing the work that's required. So making sure that that tree warden has some assistance, again, to increase our capacity so that we can do more than just being reactive to citizen complaints, so that we can engage more in the community. And then beyond hiring the arborists, we're hiring some admin staff to help support this division, and then ultimately some tree crews as well. A lot of our work is done with contractors, but we do have a small in-house crew that does emergency response or storm response. But we want to increase that capacity to not just be responding to emergencies, but to being more proactive in our care and maintenance, especially when it comes to the young trees that we've planted, to get them trained and have them have a good, healthy structure so they can grow into mature trees and we can reap the benefits of having more mature trees in the landscape. Another part that I really want to work on in the short term is doing some work with our tree inventory. Kind of as a precursor to the urban forest plan, the city of Boston did have an inventory of our street trees. And we have that data. I don't know how accessible it is to the public, and it hasn't really been updated much in the last couple of years. So I want to make an effort for us to make that publicly accessible in a very easy way instead of the difficult way that it is now. I mean, I found the data by going on the city's IT webpage and then scrolling through their gallery of pages and finding this data. There might be a quicker way to get to it. But that's one of the convoluted ways you can find it. So again, looking for a way to get that out there, to get it updated, and again, have everybody know at the very least what we're talking about. And then we need to build on that. Again, like I said, updating the street tree information, we need to try and add some park data on there, trees in parks. You know, I don't know that we can ever get to the point of having all trees on private land. That's sort of a whole different thing altogether, especially just the quantity that would be involved in that. And if we wanted to get to the same level of detail that we have with our street trees. But at the very least, again, we are charged with managing those street trees and those trees on the public right of way. So we need to have detailed information, and that information needs to be accessible to anybody and everybody. And again, all of this, I really want kind of packaged with some kind of community engagement. And that's the next question that I have. How would I plan to go about engaging the community in an ongoing basis? I think anything we need to do, or anything we do, needs to be done with some sort of community engagement, some sort of dialogue with the community. I mean, we can come up with these great maps that are in the urban forest plan, but from that, you know, we can identify priority areas, but from that, we still need to have, you know, individual dialogue within the community. Again, we know where we need to focus our efforts, where we need to focus our resources, focus our capacity. Again, as we're growing the capacity in our division, we know where we can put some of those resources. Again, to truly understand what the concerns are. And this was, you know, a lot of my experience in the city of Detroit. Again, working with a nonprofit that did a lot of tree planting in Detroit called the Greening of Detroit. And we could identify areas, and there's lots of areas that needed trees in Detroit, and there's lots of areas, places that need trees in Boston. Again, it's the easy part is identifying those, but getting those trees in the ground and then making them survive to truly get those benefits is where we need that engagement, because we need some sense of ownership, that it's not just, you know, the city's tree that they need to do something with or they've neglected. So how do we, you know, promote that ownership of, again, that shared ownership of this asset and this resource? Again, that's done out of dialogue. I don't know that I have a simple answer, and it might be a very different dialogue in one community than another. And don't ask me to name a lot of neighborhoods about, I'm learning them, but I don't know the details of all Boston neighborhoods, other than, like I said, I'm living in Brighton now, and I'm starting to at least learn that neighborhood. So again, this is about, again, dialogue. And it's not just with having people come to us in that dialogue, but as we're out there, as our arborists are out there in the community, trying to make those connections and bringing more voices together so that it informs the work that we do. We're not just, again, finding something and putting it there because it's a good, but understanding the needs of the community. And again, that could be individuals, that could be large groups like this, or coalitions like this. And again, related to this, there's a question of Will there be a standing advisory committee about the implementation of the urban forest plan, and will there be any subcommittees for various components, and how will representatives be chosen? The short answer is yes, we want that. We want to have that. Exactly how members will be chosen, I can't tell you at this point. Again, we want it to be a diverse representation of people and voices across the city, especially voices that aren't often heard at at the administrative level at the city. So we will go out and try and seek people to participate in this advisory body. Again, what exactly that's going to look like, I don't know just yet, but we are talking about that, and we are looking for ways to build that committee, because we think that's an important component that was called for in the urban forest plan, an important component of again, implementing that roadmap. And that roadmap from the urban forest plan is really for the next 20 years. So along the way, we may have to, adjust our methods of doing things, our plan a little bit, and we definitely want to get feedback from people throughout the community. So again, the short answer is yes, we want to do that. And I think that's an ongoing process of exactly what that will look like and how people will be chosen to serve in that capacity. Then there was another question about the plan to water and care for newly planted street trees, and over how long? Well, this is something we know we need to increase. We know this is essential to, again, the survivability of the resources that we're putting out there. Currently, most of our tree planting is done with the contractor, and part of the contract is that they water and care for the trees for 2 years after planting. We know we need to improve that process of, again, monitoring our contractors, our vendors. And so again, with more capacity in-house with these arborists that we're hiring, we're going to look at ways to more completely track the work that's being done out there and making sure they're getting watered. 2 years might be a good time to get trees established, but more than that might be necessary. So what are we going to do after 2 years? Again, this is a place where we can look for that flexibility of building our in-house capacity with our field crews. That's possibly something that they could work on, or that's work that they can engage in. This is also another great place where we can partner with groups. Again, I'm pretty sure that Speak for the Trees had a teen urban, I forget the acronym, Teen Urban Corps last summer, and I know they're planning it this summer, and watering trees was part of that. Again, my experience in the city of Detroit was we had a close partnership with our nonprofit that was involved in that work. So we know we need to expand that work, whether it's in-house, in partnership, through, again, that personal community engagement of getting people to have a better sense of ownership of the trees that are immediately adjacent to them, or maybe even a little farther away. But we understand that also requires some other resources and equipment. You might not be able to just carry a bucket from your house and water it. These might be, trees where you have to go a little bit of a distance. So we have to make sure that we're supplying adequate resources to whomever is doing this work, or that there are adequate resources out there to do this work. So again, the answer to that is, the contractors do monitor it for 2 years. We want to do better about that monitoring, and then we want to look for partnerships beyond that 2-year period to make sure those trees do get established and do survive for many decades. Now I have a question here about plan to replace trees that have died or been cut down on public lands. So again, this is something that was kind of talked about at the tree ordinance hearing. And public lands, certainly the public right of way and parks are part of public lands, and that is something we're directly responsible for. We know that is our mission. We're charged with those trees. But then there's other public entities like the school district and public works and the libraries, whoever else may own land in the city. And I think that's part of that ordinance process of determining what we need to do to go about holding other entities within the city to the same standards that we hold ourselves to, or hold other people doing work on public right of way. So we are working on that through the ordinance, or how we can strengthen that notion of making sure that all city entities follow the same kind of standards that we've set forth on our right of way. And then a next question, and it's that they did preface this with, at this early point, what do I see as some of the biggest challenges facing our urban forestry division? I guess I'm going to just highlight two things. And one that, again, I've already touched on it, community engagement. I can't say that enough. We need to build capacity in community engagement. We need to be in dialogue. And that's, again, with individuals, that's with nonprofit partners. That is something I'm always going to be talking about. I know that's been a challenge because we just haven't had the resources internally to spend that time in engagement. We need to do that. We absolutely need to do that. Again, that will be a challenge. Again, it's challenging to get to those people that, again, feel that their voice is never heard because they're not speaking up. So how do we make sure we engage people from all facets, from all parts of the neighborhood, whatever they may bring to the table. So again, that is the struggle of making sure we're reaching everybody. And I think a second challenge will be internally, sort of having coordination among departments. I think any big city struggles with that. Everybody thinks, their work is the priority work, whether it's, tearing up a street or putting in a new sewer line. So how do we have that better coordination? I think those are two big challenges and two things that we need to continue to address without a doubt. Next question is just how would I plan to have the Urban Forestry Division encourage homeowners to plant trees? And another question about identifying all possible spots to plant trees in the city. I think identifying the spots to plant trees is, again, somewhat of the easy part. Not all of them are the perfect place to actually plant a tree. Again, just because there was a tree pit there may be conflicts now that there weren't historically, whether that's with street lights or overhead wires or something of that nature. But we have some set of data that includes openings, available planting locations for trees. Again, of course, we haven't been great about updating that, but I want to get that information up to date. So we're looking at all ways to get this data as good and clean as possible. So that will definitely be, again, helpful to have. But like I said, I think that's sort of like the easy part of the project. The next part is, again, really engaging residents to have some shared ownership in this resource to make sure that it can last. And I think part of those conversations are then, we don't have to limit ourselves to trees on the public right of way. I think as we have those conversations, as we have that engagement, that's where we can encourage more homeowners to plant private trees as well. Again, and I believe Speak for the Trees has done some tree giveaways in the past. I think, we're looking for ways to leverage funds to do things like that. I think, giving people, even if it's just a little seedling, those little seedlings, if planted and cared for, can certainly grow to be, very substantial trees in the landscape. So again, having that dialogue with people, again, even if it's about public trees, can be transferred to maybe some interest in planting trees on private property, and then sharing some resources like a tree giveaway is a good way to approach that. I think this is sort of a related question. It was asked, describing my approach to educating the public and other government agencies about the benefits of trees. Again, it's in dialogue. What meeting can we go to? Who will invite us to talk about trees? I will, gladly attend, or we'll make sure we can have somebody present. I want to make sure that the Parks and Recreation Departments is a presence in the community, that people know we're a resource, that they can get in contact with us. We're talking about setting up just sort of a general email for the Urban Forestry Division, so that people can contact us. So you don't have to know somebody's particular name or who exactly they need to talk to, but they can ask their question, and we can distribute the work among us, and we can have that response. Again, we can, as we bring on an admin person here, again, giving us an opportunity to have a more robust response and dialogue with individuals, rather than just taking in the complaint or the concern, doing something and writing a 1 or 2 sentence comment saying it was completed. But again, having more of that dialogue of understanding, what that need was, or why that concern came up in the first place. There might be more to the story than just there was a branch got broken and it was hanging on the sidewalk or something like that. So Again, any way we can dialogue with the public will be good for us. Other government agencies, again, making sure we have a seat at the table, making sure we speak up in those meetings, making sure the needs of the urban forest are at least heard or presented. Let me say at the very least presented. I can't tell if they'll be heard by other entities, but they need to be presented. And making sure we're consistent in how we do that, making sure we can set some standards, or again, having those partnerships and relationships. And, you know, right at the beginning, I mentioned that street tree inventory. You know, I think that's really important for just a public aspect of sharing information, but that's really important also on the internal side. Making sure that can be a layer of data that can be put on our, you know, in our GIS software. So it can be something that's looked at, you know, initially when somebody's considering infrastructure projects. It's just a layer that they can click on, and they know that there's something there, and they know that there's, you know, planting spots available. Maybe that can be part of a project that goes on. Again, making sure we incorporate that data internally is very important too. There's another question here about the Green New Deal and how this, you know, there's a lot of attention towards green buildings and transportation, and where do trees fit in? Again, I will admit, certainly I've heard the term Green New Deal. I'm familiar with it on kind of a larger federal level. I'm not that familiar with specifically what's going on in the city of Boston and their plans around work projects for the Green New Deal. But that is something that, again, I want to make sure that we engage in some way. I think trees are always a part of that. Anytime we're talking about a green infrastructure in some way, again, even if it's transportation, whether we're talking about you know, non-motorized transportation, especially, I'm sure would fit into Green New Deal projects. And we're talking about bike lanes, making sure bike lanes, that we can have shade on bike lanes and shade on pedestrian paths. Trees are always a part of the conversation when we talk about green projects. So again, that's something I personally want to learn more about, and make sure we are engaged in the work in one way or another, engaged in the conversation, and we can bring, you know, other voices to the conversation as well. There was a question here about does the city have a plan to water mature trees that have been stressed by continued drought? Well, no, we don't have a plan for that. We scarcely have at this time, scarcely have a plan to water newly planted trees. I think logistically that might be something that presents some difficulty. I mean, if we have a time of prolonged drought, you know, basically every tree in the landscape is stressed. But again, this is where that's community engagement and that shared sense of ownership may come in. Again, if we have some in that dialogue, and we can educate residents, you know, they can maybe engage in some tree watering, whether even if it's for more mature trees in the landscape, if we have periods of drought. So again, we don't have any kind of immediate plan to have a watering program for mature trees. They tend to thankfully be generally a little more resilient in those situations once they're established. But again, we definitely need to focus on the establishment of new trees, and then from there, again, use our resources as efficiently as we can to ensure the health and survivability of all parts of the urban forest. And then a final question, which I thought this was kind of a good one to end with. There are a number of corporations that are eager to give grants to nonprofits and community groups to support tree plantings in Boston. Allowing nonprofits to plant trees on city rights of way in parks would enable the city to leverage funds, extending the urban forestry budget. And the question was, how can we approach these opportunities with you? Again, I appreciate just even how that was phrased, because it needs to be in partnership. One, I think one of the great things about working with nonprofits is absolutely that they can leverage funds that we can't easily leverage. And that's especially through corporations, philanthropic groups, any kind of grants that can be applied for. It's easier for a nonprofit entity to take in that money and complete the project than it might be for the city to apply for, especially smaller grants. We're talking about something that might be a few $1,000s or something like that. Again, we really need these partnerships. Again, this is a great way to leverage lots of diverse funding sources out there. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we have the resources to complete those projects. So we are happy to meet with and plan. Again, any project needs to have some level of planning for it to be a success. We can say we want to plant 12 trees in a park, but if we're talking about 12 2-inch caliper ball and burlap trees, there are some logistics involved in that. One, just of course, where the trees are placed is one part of it, but just moving the trees, transporting the trees to site, moving them on site, having shovels and whatever to get them in the ground, having buckets or watering equipment, having stakes and ties. So, I definitely want to be open to planning this and making sure we're planning it with adequate time to get everything approved that might be approved. Again, there's actually a lot more kind of process in the city of Boston than there ever was in the city of Detroit with planting. And part of it is just that the infrastructure is different. In Detroit, we had lots of wide tree lawns. So the area between the sidewalk and the curb was grassy and might have been 5 to 15 feet wide. And that was quite common in Detroit. That's definitely not the case in Boston. So there's a lot of different regulations that go on here, and even things that, might be state legislated about what needs to be done. So there's a planning process. So we definitely want to work with any group to help leverage funds, whether it's, again, in a city park, in a particular right-of-way. We are happy to have those conversations and to make sure that we all have the adequate resources to get the project done and to make it a success for the future, because that's what we want. Planting those trees can take 2 hours on a Saturday, but the intention is that those trees will be there for 50, 60, 80 years or more. So it's okay if we take a little bit more time in the planning to ensure that we're going to get decades of benefits from those trees. So we are definitely open to working with groups and having that conversation and working together for success. We share the same goals. So that's those are the questions that were submitted. So I appreciate that, and I will turn it back over to Jarrell.
Todd, thank you very, very much. Thank you for taking the time to look at the questions and answer them for us. It's really, really greatly appreciated. You join a long line of special guests from the city of Boston. We had Kate England, we had Oliver Sellers Garcia, we've had Mariama, we've had the mayor with us. And thank you for joining us today, Todd. It's really appreciated. Again, thanks for answering the questions. Thank you to our Buff members for asking such great questions. You all deserve a round of applause. David you were talking, Todd, but David had put in a link to our website where we do have a story for a woman who had received a seedling years ago, which grew into a ginormous pine tree in her home. You might want to check out that link. But the fact of the matter is that actually is a real thing. You give someone a seedling and 20 years later you have a giant tree. And it's possible for all of us to contribute in that way. So,
and it's not a pine tree. She called it a pine tree, and we know it's not, Todd. So don't think that we didn't catch her mistake, but we didn't want to call her out on camera. I think it's a spruce tree.
Oh, spruce tree. Okay.
Yeah. Robin calls it a pine tree. Everyone thinks of evergreen's a pine tree, right? I want actually in the vein of that. I was looking back on those tree stories, and I wanted to just let folks know that Corinne, who shared a story about her family's history with trees in Brighton, passed away last week. So when we have a moment, have a look at her video. It's very powerful. And her daughter just posted that her mom had passed. I never met her, but I'm glad we had a chance to capture her story about her trees. Todd, I wanted to thank you. I was going to say we're turning a new page in Boston Forestry, but I think it's more like we're turning a new leaf. So really great to hear your fresh perspective, and And I think having someone who has worked in a city with a nonprofit specifically so well, having someone come in as a director position where the city, the mayor, the staff sees the importance of this is really, you're coming at a great time. And you have us as allies with you. I know relationships, like I like to tell folks, they take a long time to nurture and develop, and then you can lose them with one word. But I do hope that in the coming months we can support your work and getting acclimated to the city that has a history that's older than Detroit's, and with that comes unique challenges. And that's history both in the landscape, but also in the way people have talked to each other about trees. So how do we reimagine that? So I will just say one opportunity that immediately came to mind, and I don't know if you've yet had a chance to talk to folks on your staff about it, but I'm just going to lay it out here, is we have developed, with help from a group of students at Northeastern, an adopted tree map that's similar to the one in New York City. We sort of took it offline past couple of months, waiting for someone to fill your position so we could talk about it and explore how it might work on the ground. The data in it is about 3 or 4 years old. It's from our Teen Urban Tree Corps program, where they collected data on street trees using an app called Open Tree Map. I will share the link with you, but it's just a small proportion of the trees. And I actually met with a group of amazing undergrads at Northeastern who have developed this for free, and they're making improvements in already amazing interface. So we're looking for to continue to really lean into this summer, have our teams use it, work with some community groups, work in partnership with you and your office to figure out how we roll it out in a way that can be sustainable, can be engaging, can be helpful not only to your work but to the trees. So essentially people adopt a tree and then care for it, and we can track that and send them emails, engage them, teach them. And we worked a little bit with Max last year to pilot it to pilot this idea and not the software with the teens in our Teen Urban Tree Corps program, and are hopeful that we can expand that work to other community groups in the coming months.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Todd, is it all right to share your email with the room here? Could you go to the next slide, David?
Please, go right ahead. And just a comment about the inventory. I think that's definitely a conversation I would like to have with you, David, because I actually have looked at what's on your website, and I really like what's there. The work that they put together. It's very user friendly. It has a lot of information. It has a lot of good information. It's linked to like the Google Street View or some sort of street view, so you can see the kind of up-to-date picture in addition to any pictures that were uploaded. That's the kind of thing that we need. I definitely want to have that, again, a good public-facing presentation of the data. But I know in the short term, I want to get something out there sooner than later that we can begin to update, because we've waited too long to do any updates. We have lists of trees that we've planted and trees that we've removed, but it really hasn't been put into that data set. So I want to get something out there, but I know in the longer term, I'm going to need to take that data set, and it might have to be merged into something that's part of a larger city project, and then other city departments are involved in it. And I know that that's not going to be there in a couple of months. That might be a couple of years before that sort of all comes together. But I don't want to wait a couple of years to get something out there. So whatever we do, I want to make sure that the data set that we create is able to be transported to a different format, so we don't have to recreate the data in a couple of years. So again, I think this will be a great ongoing conversation for us to have and see what would work out best. But we definitely need to get something out there. Again, I think the work that they've done is excellent.
Yeah, well, let's connect, because it's not my job description, but I love to geek out on this stuff. So and bringing in those students, I mean, they're really the brains behind this, and they can make the magic happen. And I defer to some other folks who know even more than me about GIS stuff, like Erica and Jack, and I'm sure other people in this room about how to do that. Because we certainly don't want to A, duplicate your efforts, or B, corrupt the data, right? Those are two things that we don't want to do. So the data doesn't necessarily need to talk to each other, but the data certainly needs to be in conversation with each other, if you know what I mean.
All right. Speaking of Erica, she has her hand up. Do you have something to add, Erica?
Yeah, I just have a question that I didn't submit, but I asked this when Kate England came, and I think I might have asked this when Oliver came. But just Todd, do you think you could tell us a tree story? Like, what's your favorite tree species? What's your favorite individual tree? Or if you have some other story about you and trees that you could share with us, just so we can get to know you like more as a person. Thanks.
Well, I did see you asked that in the chat, and I was thinking about it, hadn't responded yet, but I did see that was someplace in there in the chat. Honestly, one of my favorite trees is an American elm. In some ways, I think it's a very beautiful tree, a mature tree. They can actually be kind of dirty trees and kind of like have a lot of problems. They're not always great trees, but I think that's what's, yeah, I'm okay with that. It's, you know, it has a certain beauty, but it has a certain kind of difficultness to it, or it can be a little finicky in some ways. And, you know, Detroit, like many Midwestern cities in the mid 20th century, was overplanted with American elms. And there were beautiful, you know, streets lined with that sort of cathedral canopy of those elms. And the pictures of those that exist, I think, are sort of the romantic version of the urban forest, the kind of thing that lots of people can get behind. I don't necessarily want to create those kind of monocultures again. that is not what I'm looking for, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. Again, it's just a tree that I like. So I'm always big on planting varieties of American elm, whether they're disease resistant or hybrids. I like getting lots of those back into the landscape.
All right. Thank you, Todd. I have one more question for you, if that's all right, if you don't mind taking it. Lisa, do you want to ask that question? Your question? Before we wrap up?
Sure. I put it in the chat, so now I'm looking for it in the chat. Okay. So how might the Boston Urban Forestry engage with planning and development as a strong voice for integrating tree canopy preservation into their review process? For example, require developers to provide photos of parcels' existing conditions, not just misleading descriptions and pretty renderings. Another one, to include detailed descriptions and metrics on the concrete public health, environmental, and habitat benefits of existing natural green infrastructure on the parcel in their decision-making. Can you, it may be way too early for you, but I just wanted to put that out there.
I completely understand your concern for getting it out there. And I think those are conversations we need to have. It sounds like you're talking about trees on private land. Is that part of the concern of when there's a review process from the planning department, or because
both public and private?
Well, if there's a development that impacts a tree on the public right of way, there is a process that is reviewed through the Parks Department and through the tree warden, and we do have a lot of say if it impacts a tree that's on the right of way. So I know there's something that exists there, and we do try to show up on site. And again, those are just for public trees on the public right of way.
That historically has been appallingly not insufficient. Just saying.
Well, again, we will work on improving that. I will say then we definitely need to improve that. I'm sure anecdotally that there's probably a lot of truth to that. So as we build capacity here, we do need to make sure that we are showing up and holding people accountable. Yes, anybody can submit a piece of paper that says they're going to do something, but if we're never out there checking or having any kind of accountability, no one's ever going to change. No one's ever going to do anything different. Developers, want to do the easiest thing and the cheapest thing, but that's not necessarily the best thing for the community. So we definitely need to hold them accountable, and I hope we can do better in the future. I will work for us to do better in the future.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisa, for your question. Todd, again, thank you very much, everyone. His email is up on the screen. Please fill out the survey. I put the link in the chat. You can just click on that. It only takes a few minutes. And we are ready to wrap up. Again, thank you so everyone for being here. Look forward to seeing you all on April 14th for our next Buff meeting. And within the next couple of days, I'll send out the Buff meeting notes and the video attached to it as well. So again, I'm Jarrell. Thank you all for being here. Have a
Thank you,
great week.
Todd. Welcome
Yep.
to Boston. I
Yeah,
hope
welcome to Boston, Todd.
enjoy the festivities tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.